Are we not allowed to end with "May the Force be with you"?
I was going to say,
get us sued?
"Live long and prosper,"
No!
just to like get everybody angry.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. I'm Matthew. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm excited because now we are going to kick off the second series we're going to be doing, which is a whole series of episodes as I rewatch The Clone Wars, along with two good friends who are who've recently gotten into the show and are big Star Wars fans and people who I'm really excited to be talking about the show with. So, Riki and Sarah, welcome, and say hello and tell us a bit about yourselves.
Hello, I am Riki Hayashi. I guess mostly we want to talk about Star Wars, so I'm a lifelong fan. Supposedly my parents took me to one of the movies when I was a baby. I don't remember this, but they claim they did, so that's where I claim my Star Wars heritage too. Watched all the movies, of course. I read a lot of the earlier books when they came out, the expanded universe stuff. Didn't follow along too much after that. This is my first time watching the Clone Wars and really any of the additional stuff beyond the movies. So it's been really interesting for me. My favorite character is Darth Vader. I have a Darth Vader tattoo.
Nice.
So that's something I'm committed to for life now, for good or for bad.
Sounds good.
Favorite movie is The Last Jedi. Watching the last one. I can't even remember what it's called. Rise of Skywalker. Watching that one actually reinforced how much I liked or loved The Last Jedi. And just like my favorite random thing in all the Star Wars universe, I listed two now. The first one is Salacious Crumb. That's the little like court jester of Jabba the Hutt who sits there and laughs a lot. And then the other one is the trash can droid, which just kind of lumbers around in the background of just about everything.
And both of those are things that have popped up early in Clone Wars, so I can see especially why they're on your mind. But yeah, both two fun parts of the universe. And Sarah, how did you come to be into Star Wars?
Hi, I'm Sarah Hayashi. I got into Star Wars when I was a kid. My mom took me to go see The Phantom Menace. I was the appropriate age to love Jar Jar Binks. Please don't hold that against me.
We all go through that as a child.
I know, right? But in high school, I with a bunch of friends caught up on all like the old, quote unquote old, the 80s movies, 70s movies that we hadn't seen, and New Hope was one of them. And it's been my like favorite movie to watch when I'm like at home sick or like just need a pick me up movie. It's definitely my favorite of the Star Wars movies. I've since gone back and rewatched the prequels, but I've seen Phantom Menace twice and then the other two only one time each, but I've probably seen A New Hope like upwards of 20 times.
Yeah.
I'm really into the Star Wars universe. Not so much so that I'm reading any of the books or comics or anything like that, though I am aware that they exist. And this is also my first time watching Clone Wars. So yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Riki, I have kind of a similar background to you. I don't remember a time when I hadn't watched Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. They were just part of my growing up at a very young age. And they've continued to always be a huge part of my life. I think my favorite character is Harrison Ford. He's Han Solo.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, exactly. And that may have been part of it, because I also loved the Indiana Jones movies as a kid. But, and I've just always felt really spoken to by these movies, and by the TV shows. And I have seen the Clone Wars before. I watched them once about 5 years ago. I never wanted to watch them. I always thought it was an animated show. It was a kids show. Yeah. And then my friend Paul, who was my original podcast host on the Superhero Ethics podcast, he knew I was really interested in a lot of questions about the what happened to the Republic, what happened to the Jedi, what happened to Anakin, and that the Clone Wars TV show really explored all that. So I'm really looking forward to the three of us getting to dive into this show and talk about what makes it a lot better than you might think, as well as some really bad parts that it has. Sarah, your childhood favorite, Jar Jar Binks, as we've already seen, will continue to show up. And,
Misa's so disappointed.
Yeah, and he's still just as racist as are the Trade Federation folks. But yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch the show with you guys as you watch it for the first time, especially now that we have seen the sort of finale of the Star Wars universe, and it gives us a chance to think about, how do the events of this show inform everything else we come to know about the Star Wars universe, because this period of time of the Clone Wars is one that is, not explored in anything except this TV show, but seems to affect so many things in the universe that we'll be talking about going forward. So let me also just say quickly for our listeners, we're going to try and keep this fairly spoiler-free for the stuff well, hold on a second.
Really?
Well, let me finish. For the episodes of the Clone Wars that we are not talking about yet.
Okay, that's fair.
So today we're talking about episodes 1 through 5 of season 1. But that being said, we are expecting that you already have seen, or at least know, all of the other major Star Wars movies. So spoiler warning, Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader, and Darth Vader is Luke's father. I know. Sorry to break it to you. But yeah, so if you've not seen some of the Star Wars movies, or you want to kind of hold on to some of those things, probably you might want to put this on hold and come back to it. But if you are going to be watching the Clone Wars show along with us, or if you saw it some time ago and are just excited to to kind of hear about it through us again, or you're not interested in watching it but just want to learn about the issues we discuss, welcome, and I hope you're going to enjoy this look back at it. So let me just start this, guys. I know, Riki, I kind of not twisted your arm into Clone Wars, but you were not terribly excited about watching the show to begin with. What's for you, and for you, Sarah, what's kind of been your general impression of the show so far?
Yeah, it's very good. Over the years, I've had people like you, Matthew, tell me that watching the Clone Wars makes the prequels better, and I just never believe them. And even now, I don't think it makes the prequels better. I think it's a better prequels. Yeah, is kind of my impression.
Yeah, I, again, really similar, kind of, bristled against the idea because I had so many people say, oh, well, if you watch it, then you'll love the prequels. And I was just so angry at this idea that I had to commit to a whole TV series to make 3 movies good. Cause that doesn't mean that movies are good. They're still very bad movies.
Agreed.
But yeah, it's been such, a great show to watch, but it also kind of still makes me extra angry about the prequels because it highlights so many things that they could have done.
I think it's actually making the prequels worse. Because the everything you hate about the prequels, the lack of chemistry between Anakin and Padme still exists in the Clone Wars. It's why these two people are supposed to be married? Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly the voice actor who's playing Anakin in this, I think is much better than Hayden Christensen ever was.
Oh, for sure. But just even beyond that, sort of getting to see the humanity of the clones, and this idea that the Republic maybe isn't just very, very clearly evil. They've got this sort of nebulous quality, whereas in the prequels it was just we're called the dark side, we're the bad guys. But we've got cookies, so come on in, Anakin. He's well, all right. You really see that relationship being built with Palpatine, who is being presented as the Chancellor, a really good guy and solid figure in the government. And then you see the clones as these individual human beings who are sort of fighting for their freedom. And it brings up a lot of really interesting points that I think the prequels just kind of midichlorian over.
Yeah. Don't use that word.
I can edit that out, Riki. Don't worry.
One thing.
Oh, go ahead.
One thing for me is I don't like the name. I don't like that it's called Clone Wars. They call these wars the Clone Wars. Because it's all based on one kind of throwaway line from Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, where he mentions, I fought with your father in the Clone Wars, right? That's the origin of this. And I always imagined it as clones versus clones. Like the two sides of the galaxy are using clones to fight against each other. And then it turns out it's clones versus droids. And really it should have either been called like, you know, a civil war or the separatist war or the clone droid war.
I think when I watched, I had many, many, many disappointments when I watched the second prequel. But Riki, I think you're right. One of them that I had was this didn't match at all my image of what the Clone Wars were all going to be about. And I really appreciate, as you were saying, Sarah, that one of the things this show does is to say, okay, but what if the clone, you know, who actually are the clones? And let's get into their kind of mental life a bit. To backtrack a bit, it's not that I think that this show makes the prequels better. I think it helps the third prequel make more sense. Like I watched it again after watching the show, and a lot more things clicked for me, and a lot more of the plot points like had a lot more power. But you're right. There's still no chemistry. There's still bad acting. There's still bad dialogue. This certainly doesn't change any of that.
And it's a bad plot. Like the overall plot of Darth Sidious's evil plan is just nonsensical.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, I think I'll have to. I would like to maybe watch the third prequel again after we get through the Clone Wars. Riki is shaking his head no. But even just watching it now, I can see some of those reasons, especially why Anakin responded so well to Palpatine / Sidious. Right? Because of this relationship that's being built over this series, not to get like too much farther past, these 5 episodes we're going to talk about here. But yeah, I can see what you're saying about it making them make more sense, if not necessarily making them better.
Yeah. I mean, again, without getting into spoilers, but I think we can just say openly that 2 of the main themes that are explored throughout this show, one involving Anakin especially, one is Anakin constantly feeling like the Jedi are not listening to him and that they're kind of being condescending to him, and then thus him sort of turning more towards Palpatine. But the other is, and this is something we do see a lot in these first couple episodes that I look forward to us talking about, Anakin, we keep hearing that the Jedi are not supposed to form attachments. And in the prequel, it's just the fact that he's in love with Padme and had those feelings for his mother, and that's why he turns to the dark side. And what the show we're always starting to see starts to explore is this is kind of a general thing for him. And one of the things that means is that he becomes attached to the soldiers who fight for him, to the clones. And I think that's a much more, it just gives much more depth to the idea of how does his, attachment to the clones and the fact that he cares about his soldiers and he can't stop the soldiers from dying. How does that, lead to him being so desperate to keep Padme alive by the third movie?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because you're right. Like, it doesn't really expound on the relationship between Anakin and Padme at all. In fact, in one of the episode 3, maybe, where he's got to save Padme from the
Grievous, General
Grievous. Yeah, the big warship that has a name, Malevolence. That's
yep.
And they have like a moment where they're like about to kiss, and they're interrupted by 3PO, and you can almost like feel the sigh of release of like, oh my gosh, thank goodness 3PO interrupted us. Cause it's just like that awkward banter between them. But then if you look at the relationship even between like Anakin and Obi-Wan or, Anakin and Ahsoka, it is that idea of him building relationships with other people who aren't Padme. I don't know. I hope as we get later in the series that this non-chemistry with Padme is going to be addressed, but that might be a pipe dream.
Certainly, I will say that the show leads me to the conclusion that Obi-Wan is utterly clueless, because the element of Obi-Wan spending this much time with the two of them and not picking up that they're together does not say much for his perceptions.
Oh my goodness, no, I think I think that they don't even realize that they're together half the time. Like, I don't think it says anything against Obi-Wan that you don't see that these two are a married couple, because, like, my goodness, if I didn't know that they were married and it was, like, shoved in my face all the time, I don't think I would pick up on it. I don't think they even know that they're married sometimes, right? They're just like, hi, Senator. Yeah. Oh, I mean, wife? Right, yeah, you.
This is one of those things that I either like or don't like about certain TV shows, is that when they have a predetermined endpoint in terms of relationships, and they move towards that. And sometimes, like, the way the characters and the actors interact or the plot unfolds leads you to a different place. And I really like shows that honor that and let the characters grow into themselves. One of my favorite examples is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
You know, starts off with Buffy and Angel, and it's just not a very good relationship. And by the end of the series, it's Buffy and Spike, which is still, you know, it's not a good relationship, but it was more interesting television and they had better chemistry.
I think so, yeah.
And watching the Clone Wars unfold, I would probably say, like, Anakin and Ahsoka should end up together, not Anakin and Padme.
I think Anakin and Obi-Wan should end up together, not Anakin. But yeah, no, I think it suffers from, like, the How I Met Your Mother syndrome, where they've got this predetermined ending that they're sort of forced into. Like, we know that that's what they're going to do because there's these movies that have already been made. But yeah, it is really, I don't know, unfortunate that they don't have the ability to sort of, develop their own conclusion, I guess. The show, rather. Yeah,
it's definitely a problem. And I think it's, you know, I remember, like, I'm a huge Marvel fanboy as well as Star Wars. And to me, some of the weakest Marvel movies were ones where the author, like, that certain characters had to get to a certain point by the end of the movie to set up the next couple of movies. Avengers 2, Age of Ultron is my favorite example of this, where it just seemed like large bits of the plot made no sense except for later movies. And I think one of the real challenges that Clone Wars has is, you're right, we know where all the characters are supposed to wind up, but at least we get a large amount of room to play in to get there. And I think some of the things that makes the show challenging sometimes are when it seems like it's kind of not knowing where to go because of where it has to wind up. But I think that the time it takes to explore a lot of that really is where it shines.
Well, we get a couple of characters here that are not in the movies. So that's an opportunity for them to develop those storylines and hopefully go somewhere interesting. We mentioned Ahsoka Tano, Anakin's apprentice. The clones, right? Captain Rex is, I don't think he's in the movies. I know Commander Cody was in the third movie.
I believe Cody is the only one in the movies. I think all of the other clones who are introduced to do not appear in the movies. That's correct.
Or at least they're not named in the movie.
Right.
Sure, yeah. How could you tell? But yeah, no, I agree. Like, we're getting to know these individual clones. We're getting to know Ahsoka, and even just, like, some of the rando generals.
The Jedi, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly one small thing that it does add to to the third movie is when you get to that scene in Order 66 and you see 4 or 5 Jedi be murdered, all of those Jedi are ones you've come to get to know pretty well in the show. So it does make that scene have some more power.
And even, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say even they'd be clones you get to know pretty well. Like, even if you don't know exactly which clones those are, like, we've spent this series theoretically, like we've haven't got to the end of it yet, but you're watching these clones develop as people. So seeing them turn against the Jedi, you know the relationship that the Jedi and the clones have with each other, and that it's a tight relationship. It's very respectful and close. And so to watch them just like, Order 66 is, I think, it gives that scene a lot more impact, having seen the show.
Yeah, what I really need now would be something post Order 66 that follows some clones that maybe like realize that they were programmed in this way and then like feel that weight of guilt of what they did. Like, that could be very interesting.
But also,
let me just quickly interject there, and then Sarah, please go ahead. I will say, Riki, I have not read it yet, but our mutual good friend Jonah, who is a hopefully will be a guest on this show at some point soon, and who is a huge fan of the books. One of the series of books that he is most fond of specifically follows a group of clone soldiers. They're called the Republic Commando books, and my understanding is that the last book in that series Order 66 takes place during that book. I think it's actually called Order 66. So I'll be reading that hopefully at some point soon. And if it does the kind of stuff you're talking about, I'll definitely let you know, because I think you're right. That'd be a great story to dive into. Sarah?
I wouldn't want it to just be like they turn on and off and don't realize it. Like I really want them to, I mean, it's terrible to say that, but I want them to know and feel what they did.
Yeah.
In terms of character development.
Okay, so what I was going to say, I don't think violates our spoiler policy. Riki and I have watched more than just these first 5 episodes of Clone Wars in anticipation of doing the podcast. But it also, I think that the Order 66, while making more sense, also doesn't make any sense at all. Because, like, how are these clones defeating these Jedi? Because we're also getting to learn just how powerful the Jedi are, even through things like not just the Clone Wars, but like that newest video game that just came out. Oh my goodness, Fallen Order. Yeah, where you're just watching like a single Jedi take on like swaths and swaths of like stormtroopers.
Right.
You're like, how did these clones even manage to take down the Jedi? But
yeah, I think you guys were saying before, the show makes some parts of the prequel movies make more sense, but it probably also makes some parts of them even worse, because I think the only way I've ever been able to headcanon it is by thinking that the Jedi feel so safe with the clones that they kind of let down their defenses and they aren't like probing the clone's mind always to worry about possible being turned on, and so it's a total surprise. But yeah, those scenes never quite made sense.
Yeah.
My recollection of those scenes is that several of the Jedi sense like a change in the clones and like are able to turn around and ignite their lightsaber and deflect some shots.
Right.
So my headcanon would be that the sense of betrayal is so large that they are emotionally unable to focus in that moment.
Yeah.
Right? Because these are friends and might even be close to family in some cases, right? With how they have fought together.
Yeah, I think actually that makes more sense. And it also raises what in a moment I want to start getting into some of the specific questions that the show has been raising. But one of the things that I really like is that one thing we see is that there's a wide divergence in how the Jedi view the clones, in terms of their moral worth and in terms of, who are they? What are they to them? Are they expendable? Are they people? Are they family? And so you're right, that certainly for the Jedi we see, that could definitely be an interpretation of it that makes a lot of sense. Just as kind of a last general comment about the show, have you guys seen the TV show Batman the Animated Series?
Boy, have we. We have all seasons on DVD. Yeah.
Oof. Well, I'm wondering then if you'd agree with this comparison, because the way I think of this show is, I think of it in some ways as very similar to Batman the Animated Series. Simply in that both of them are ostensibly children's shows, and every now and then they'll remind you, no, this is a children's show, and don't think too much of it. But then at other times, like it really goes into topics that are a lot deeper and a lot heavier than you'd expect from a TV show, from a kids show. And certainly that I approached both of them thinking they weren't going to be as good as they were, because I saw them as, kind of more for kids. Is that a comparison that kind of makes sense for you all, or do you see it in a different way?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the idea of it being like a kids show. And I think the Batman the Animated Series is like an apt comparison, although I watched the animated series on TV, so kind of had this feel that it wasn't that kiddie of a kids show. But yeah, Clone Wars, I was like, oh, whatever, this is... And I worked at a comic book store for a very long time, and a lot of the people coming in consuming like Clone Wars material were kids. But watching it, yeah, there's like a lot of dark stuff and like really emotional stuff. And yeah, a lot of characters die. They deal with a lot of these heavy topics of like morality, and yeah, what it means to be like a human being. And I think like you were talking about, we see different characters' views towards the clones. There's the episode where we're watching the clones get trained. Nope. No, we're they're at the base on Rishi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess this might be like a little spoilery, but later in the series, we see the episode that took place immediately before and immediately after this encounter. And we get to see someone's viewpoint of clones as just like the sort of disposable army, and other people viewing clones as like these highly individual beings. But yeah, I think, and that's not really something I'd expect from a kids show.
What I didn't expect from a kids show is so much death.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a war, but there's like straight up murder.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of torture.
Yeah.
In this show that really shocked me. And so like in those moments I go, this is a kid's show. And then there are other moments where, you know, there's just a bunch of battle droids blowing up and I'm like, this is a kid's show.
Yeah. And like I think it's also interesting because I mean, like with many TV series, the first season is definitely, I think, the weakest.
Yep.
And you can definitely see that the clones, the droids are definitely meant to appeal to kids with their like little Roger. Yeah, exactly.
Who programmed these things?
Who programmed these guys?
They're
they're terrible. And they're just like pratfalling all the time with their little like, oh.
Yep.
I thought you were supposed to blow him up. But then as we move on in the series, we kind of leave those dopey droids behind. At least we don't get confronted with them as much. Mm-hmm. And same with even like Ahsoka. She is extraordinarily annoying in these first 5 episodes. But grows so much beyond it. Like even just calling R2-D2 R2-y is just like giving me an aneurysm.
And Sky Guy,
what a terrible nickname.
Yeah.
But and so you definitely see that sort of appeal to kids early on, but yeah, then you move into it like really complex political stuff too, which I don't know.
Yes, it is complex. It's overly complex. Again, like Darth Sidious's master plans really don't make sense.
Yeah.
They're very complicated, sure. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to say like, oh, kids can't understand politics. Because like you don't want to give kids, I think, are smarter than we give them credit for. But yeah, these some of these political plot lines are very convoluted and like
I would like there to have been more politics.
Sure.
In fact.
Sure.
Like that's one of the things I mean, we're, into season 4? And I don't understand what the separatists are trying to do. Like, what their demands are other than separate.
Yeah.
It is something that I've commented in other points that, to me, the absolute worst moment of the entire Star Wars saga, and I mean, yes, I hate the bad romance lines in Attack of the Clones, but in terms of just betraying the plot that it could have been, to me, is when we learn that Count Dooku in the second movie has actually been working for Darth Sidious / Palpatine the whole time. Because I was really excited for the idea that there was a legitimate group of people who had legitimate grievances against the Republic, who perhaps were going quite far in where they were going with those grievances, and that Palpatine was sort of like, you know, blowing on those embers and manipulating them from behind the scenes. Because to me, I don't know if, Riki, this is what you mean, to me that would have been such a more interesting political situation of what are the Jedi doing when they realize, like, the Separatists aren't evil. They have a different political machination, and they're pretty quick to use violence to support that, and we don't like that. But I feel like there are some attempts, especially later in the show, to show some members of the Separatist group who have some very legitimate grievances. But for the most part, like Count Dooku, General Grievous, etc., these are pretty grade A mustache twirlers, as far as I can tell.
Yes.
Lightsaber twirlers. Yeah. Yeah. It's very frustrating, especially there's such a very easy parallel between the clones and the droids, right? Where the Republic just sees droids as these dispensable machines. Whereas like the Separatists could, like, why aren't they fighting for droid rights, right? Like,
Right.
There's that really easy go-to, and okay, so a little bit of a tangent, but like my favorite Disney villain of all time is Claude Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame, and the reason why is because he thinks he's the good guy the whole time.
Yeah.
Which just makes it so much more sinister. And I think I would really be interested in seeing a Star Wars universe where Palpatine thinks he's the good guy, that like he needs to separate from the Jedi and that the Jedi are too powerful, not just like maniacal left, I want power, lightning hands, right?
No, and I think that makes sense. And I think this whole thing, you know, the show leads to the idea that Anakin at least somewhat thinks he's the good guy by the time he becomes Darth Vader. Again, I think, Riki, you're right, that the third movie screws that up, but the show at least kind of will start to show him, you know, more and more coming to see maybe the Jedi are wrong. And what I like is that he kind of has a point, because we see that, as you said, the Republic and the Jedi don't come across in the best light. Let's jump into some of the kind of the specific questions that I know we're starting to come up. We've been dancing around some of them. So, and just looking at these first couple episodes, what do you think about the way the clone, we're introduced to the idea of the clones, and that the clones aren't just they're all the exact same genetic material, but we quickly learn that they have names and they have different haircuts, and they've all kind of found ways to find some individuality. What's kind of your take on the way the clone story is unfolding?
The haircuts, okay. In, I think, the second episode, they take the haircut thing way too far.
The blonde guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's like, okay.
It can be hard to follow, especially if you're not like watching the screen the entire time.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll be like preparing dinner and listening to the show. And as soon as there's like clone intensive scenes, I just have to like stop and come and stare at the screen, because otherwise, I mean, they're clones. They all have the exact same voice.
Right.
So it's kind of, it can be hard to follow that way, but I do like what they're doing. I feel like they do have distinct personalities, and but I do think that the actor D. Bradley Baker does a great job of sort of infusing distinct personalities into the clones. And then you also have their little like trademarks, I guess, like the different haircuts. Like Fives has the tattoo of the 5 on the side of his face. Obviously, Rex is very and Cody are both very easily distinguished by their armor. But especially in Rookies and in season 3, we get sort of the bookend episodes for Rookies. You really get to see these different clones and their different motivations, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful moments in these first 5 episodes we see is in the first episode, Ambush, when Yoda asks the clones to take off their helmets. Mm-hmm. Because that's, I think, when it really hit me that, yeah, these are, and he specifically says, I want to see your faces. Because, you know, and I think actually one of the clones jokes that he says, like, but it's our face. We all have the same face. And Yoda comments that, you know, he, especially through the Force, he knows them as different individuals. Mm-hmm. That moment, I think, really well sets up this idea of the clones are people in a way that it's, you know, I feel like they exist in kind of this weird halfway state where, you know, because this is a group of sentient beings that were bred specifically for the purpose of war. They have no families. They have no outside life. This is all they have ever known and all they've ever been taught to know. And in some ways, this is one of the things I think that is most amazing in a kids show, because when you think about that you have these hundreds of thousands of beings literally raised to fight and die for generals, some of whom see them as full human beings, some of them see them as cannon fodder. There's something incredibly tragic about that.
Yeah, this is to mix franchises. You know, Star Trek would have a field day with this subject, and it does. You know, the Measure of a Man, whether Data, the android, has rights, is one of the best in the series. Mm-hmm. And there are later ones with the holographic doctor on Voyager about what his rights are.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so legally, right, like, what rights do these clones have?
Yeah.
Like, can they opt out of this war?
Yeah, and I think it's also this super interesting, like, nature v nurture idea, right? Because, I mean, like, well, they're all the same. They're all like, made in these growth chambers from the exact same genetic material, but they still develop into different people. Yeah. Which I think is also really, like, cool to think about, that, like, what makes us individuals, what makes individuality a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one thing also to think about in terms of, as we were saying, the show being pretty deep, this show came out in 2008, and that was when, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars were still going. I mean, they still are in some ways, but they were a lot more intense than they are now. And we were starting conversations about who is it in this country who goes off to war, and how do people look at the people who go off to war, and the sort of the draft of poverty that exists in this country. And it's just one of many ways in which I think it's subtle, but I don't think it's coincidence that the show is kind of commenting on those topics. And as we'll get to in later seasons, they also go more into kind of the financial incentives for war and other things that were really being talked about at that time.
I think what you were saying about the war in the Middle East is, like, really interesting, because I grew up in Canada, and, like, we were obviously, like, aware of the conflict, but I don't think it was as omnipresent. Yeah. And yeah, that's a thing that I don't think I would have ever, like, drawn a connection to, especially, like, the time, right? Because, like, I think 2008, I was, like, just getting into university, sort of discovering the great wide world. But yeah, this idea of, like, disposability and being bred for a certain task, right? Like Riki was saying, can the clones opt out? Can they be, like, do they have a choice? Because, I mean, this is what they were designed for. This is what the Republic bought them for, right? And that's actually those topics are ones that are specifically addressed in later episodes of what happens if a clone doesn't want to fight anymore, and what can happen and where can that go. We've talked also about this, but in terms of the war, one of the things that I really loved, and I'm kind of curious how you took this, is in just these first 5 episodes, we get introduced to the idea that that the whole world, the whole universe isn't just the Republic and the Separatists, that there are planets that are not sure if they want to take sides in this war, and they're kind of being pressured by both sides to join in. What's kind of your take on the war and the politics that we're seeing in these first couple of episodes in terms of what it's setting up about the stories we're telling?
I don't understand. I just don't, because there are some cases where I believe planets declare that they are neutral in the war, but they have a senator in the Senate in the Republic Senate. So I don't understand how they are neutral, yet they have representation in the Republic.
I mean, that there actually is historical. If you sort of see this as a version of the American Civil War, there were states, the border states, that said that they would continue to be part of the United States, but did not support a war against the South. And so they continued to send, their Congress people to Washington, but wouldn't send any troops for the fight. And try to sort of stay neutral. The result being that both sides invaded them anyway. So it didn't really work out. But does that framework make sense, Riki? Or do you think that even that doesn't quite fit for what you're seeing here?
I don't know. Like, because the senators go and they vote on stuff like whether to keep fighting, basically, whether to keep funding the war.
Right.
I guess those senators would choose no.
It certainly makes me think that, as we said, like, the prequels did not give them much to work with. And I kind of compared, you were talking earlier about Star Trek. In Star Trek, I know that anytime they introduced a new idea somewhere with Gene Roddenberry, or after he passed away with Rick Berman or with others, people would sit down and say, okay, let's have an overall discussion about what is the Federation's perspective on this thing. And then that's going to be true for everything going forward. I don't think this is happening here. I do think that there would be situations where they'd want to write a story about a particular planet or a particular issue, and weren't really thinking about how does this play into the larger story. And that is one of my real frustrations, because as I think you said, Riki, it makes it not coming off as very sensical, because it's hard to kind of get a big picture of what's actually happening out there.
Yeah.
Well, the galaxy's too big.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that there are planets who are neutral. But yeah, it doesn't make sense that those neutral planets have representatives in the Senate, in the Republican Senate. Yeah. But I mean, even right, the very first episode is like Yoda and Dooku trying to convince the Wattos, Toydarians, there you go, that they should join their respective sides. And we get to see like fun Yoda for a brief moment. Oh, good times. But yeah, the idea that like a sort of known race, I guess, is trying to be neutral is a little tough to believe. I mean, when you get to like the Banking Federation, then it kind of makes more sense, where they're just like the Switzerland of the galaxy.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know.
So actually, this is probably a good time to segue. Do you want to start just kind of talking about each individual episode for a few minutes?
Yeah, sure.
So in Ambush, episode 1, just kind of give a refresher for those who haven't seen it. You have Yoda is traveling to Toydaria, which is the planet of, as you said, the Wattos, the person who owned Anakin in episode 1.
Oh yeah.
And the idea here is that we're introduced to Ventress, who is another Sith not Jedi but Force user, who is being mentored by Count Dooku, Darth Sidious, and she and Yoda kind of have a competition to see who can do better in battle, and the winner, the Toydarians, are going to join on their side.
Yeah, which is like a bogus setup to begin with, right? Like,
yeah, it's
we're going to
dumb.
have a fight and then you're going to go with whoever wins, which is just like, no, you can fight, but I'm going to make up my own mind. Please and thank you.
No, I would definitely go with whoever wins.
Yeah,
like, that's logical.
That's logical. Well, I was obviously like Yoda. I mean, I don't think there's any really like a loser, but Yoda holds his own.
Especially the way the plot plays out. Yoda and 3 clones destroy like what, a division, a platoon of droids.
Yeah,
like,
quite
I
a
would
lot.
definitely join them.
Yeah, including
Sure.
tanks and armor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say though, I think with this planet it does make sense, just because, and maybe here I'm headcanoning more than someone should need to, and it should have been explained. But from the prequels, we were told that Watto and his race of people, and even in the episode, they point out that this is happening way out on the Outer Rim. And I think these are places that we established in the movies. The Republic doesn't really have much reach, and these places they're kind of lawless and outside the Republic. So I think that was kind of how I understood it, was that this place wasn't part of the Republic yet.
Yeah, and that Yoda's there to try and convince them to join the Republic, and Dooku's there to try and convince them to join the Separatists.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I thought, okay, so, I mean, later in the series, I do think don't we see a Toydarian senator? But that might be like after they've decided to join or something.
Yeah, I don't know how fast it might be, it seems a little weird to be like your king agrees and then a week later send your senator to Coruscant, but
Yeah.
who knows? I will say that I love world building, and I love just sort of expanding on things, and I love that starting with the Toydarians, a lot of the races who we meet as a one-off will eventually get to have their own planet and their own senator and their own people. And I think so, to me, that was one of the things that really kind of drew me in, especially in this first episode, was seeing like, oh, wait, okay, we're not just making stuff up, but we're going to take, if there's a Watto, there must be a planet of people like him. So what's happening on that planet? Let's see what that's like.
That's one of the major benefits of being a cartoon, I think, because you just draw them, and you don't need to do all the prosthetics, or I guess nowadays CGI.
Or find the same actor. And you're right. That's a good thought. Yeah, animation actually really opens that up so much.
Even just on the finding the same actor thing, I really like the voice actors that they have, how they're sort of doing kind of impressions of the actors who played them in the movies, right? Like you get to see the Mace Windu, and he's kind of doing a Samuel Jackson impression, and then like Obi-Wan is sort of talking like, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name, but I can see his face. Moulin Rouge.
Oh, Ewan McGregor.
Ewan McGregor.
Right.
Yeah. Right? And you just like the sarcastic drawl. So yeah, and it's neat. And then obviously like with some of the characters, like Yoda, is Yoda still Frank Oz in the Clone Wars?
I don't think so, but that's actually worth looking up. It's also funny about Ewan McGregor, since Ewan McGregor himself was trying to do the Alec Guinness voice.
Yes, yeah. So it's like triple, 3 layers deep. But yeah, it really, in Ambush, yeah, so we get to see the individuality of the clones, which is really cool. We get to see fun Yoda again, which is like delightful. And yeah, we get introduced to like Dooku's apprentice. Are the Sith called apprentices? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I will say just my own point of perspective, and I very much understand why this is not how everyone would see it. I love Yoda in terms of like the mentorship and the quips and things like that. As a disabled person, I hated seeing Yoda be so physical. Because to me, it plays into this trope that we see, he's very much presented in the movies and even in the prequels as disabled. He walks with a cane. He walks with great effort. And there's a trope of, if you have magic or superpowers of some kind, you can, instead of being powerful while having a disability, you can basically be powerful and ignore your disability. So it's the one thing that bothers me a bit about Yoda. And I was thinking about that, seeing him be so super combat guy in this. But that's something this show didn't start. That comes from the movies. And so I can't really blame it for that.
No, but that's definitely a thing that, I mean, obviously, well, not maybe necessarily obviously, but like I never even considered that aspect of it. And I think you do. You bring up a really good point. Yeah, it is weird that it's this sort of like, oh yeah, obviously you're going to use your magic to like overcome your disability. Like, why not use your magic to increase your wisdom? Like, yeah, and Yoda. When I say fun Yoda, I think I do mean like quippy Yoda, because even in like the subsequent episodes, like right after, we just get Yoda standing beside Mace and like talking politics instead of being out there and like chatting with the clones and like giving off his little Yoda-isms.
So for most of the series, Yoda's number one mannerism is But in this episode, we get
yeah.
And that's but I mean, I guess.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I was gonna say like comes with like a bunch of backflips, right?
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Sorry to cut you off, Matthew.
No. I think it's a good conversation, especially because you're pointing out something I had never really thought of, but I think is very true, which is Yoda works much better as a mentor when he's working with Padawans or with other people. When he can be his little, kind of condescending, pretentious, but wonderfully wise self. It's when he's drawn into the political conversations that it wears a little thinner. What else? What did you guys think of the introduction of Ventress, our new kind of big not foil? What am I looking for? Like
it's really like antagonist.
Nemesis.
Yeah, antagonist, nemesis of a lot of this first season.
Goodness, yeah, she's something. So I think the biggest thing that I noticed about Ventress was that like her outfit makes no sense to me. Why she's got like a turtleneck, long sleeves, but like the boob window and backless outfit. Like why?
It's like something someone would wear to the Oscars.
No, I don't
think
even
that's
know.
very true.
Like, but what? I don't even know how it stays on, because like the sleeves are connected to the collar somehow. I don't know.
It's the force, yeah.
She's just
that's why she can't win a fight.
Like,
she's using all the force to keep her outfit on.
Yeah. But she also she seems interesting. She's got like her little like vampire face markings that almost look like fangs, and I think she has a sort of like Nosferatu-esque appearance. And I do like that we've got another woman in the Star Wars universe. Like that's really nice to see. And even like a baddie, right? Even though she is like very sexualized, it's just nice to have another woman, I guess. Like, cause we have Ahsoka, as well, who again is also wearing like the skimpiest outfit. Yeah. And she's like a kid, which is like super disturbing.
There's a lot that's problematic about Ahsoka and the outfit and things like that. But I agree. It's one of those things that's really, it's a weird thing because on the one hand, this is not the best example of female representation in a show like this by any means. And yet it's still the high point of women representation in Star Wars until Rey comes along. And it is nice to see those. When you watch enough, I think I kind of just start to like, blot out the sexualization of the outfits because it's the only way to kind of make it palatable. Because they are. One thing I will say is that Ventress and Ahsoka become two of my absolute favorite characters in the show. But
like even
their outfits.
Yeah, geez. And like Ahsoka's outfit wasn't even something that I really noticed until later on because she's not presented, I guess, in a way as being like sexual. Like she's a kid. Right. And then I think it was like several episodes in when I was like, wait, whoa, what the heck is she wearing? Whereas like Ventress from the outside is very like hips waggling, like I'ma seduce you and then stab you with my lightsaber.
Right.
Yeah. Well, speaking of lightsaber, I think it's cool. I believe this is the first time we see a dual wield in anything official. Maybe the video games were first, but her having two lightsabers is really cool. And they're both of like the Dooku model. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the part where I get real nerdy.
Well, I was just going to say like Grievous has 4 lightsabers, but continue.
So most Jedi have just like a straight cylinder, right? Mm-hmm. But Dooku has more of like a dueling lightsaber. Like the handle is curved,
sort of like a pistol, kind of. Yeah.
So there was actually, I think, in one of the RPGs they established various fighting styles of Jedi, and Dooku represents the more like aggressive attacking style, like fencing. And so Ventress having 2 of these and dual wielding this is kind of interesting.
I like that, especially because it's, I think, helps to explain that, in A New Hope, lightsabers are basically claymores, as far as I can tell. I mean, these are big, two-handed swing.
You take
slowly.
a big swing, and then like they stop with their sword, and you just like sit there and zap at each other for a little bit.
Whereas by the time of like Rey and Kylo, they're pretty much like they're sabers, Mm-hmm. And so I please jump in with that nerdiness as much as you can, especially because we're gonna get to episodes where we see Padawans making their own lightsabers that I think you're gonna really enjoy.
Ooh, that's exciting.
So any other kind of general thoughts about this first episode?
I think it's a really neat setup, right? Like I think it's a good setup too, because we get to see Yoda, who's like a very recognizable character in the Star Wars universe, and then we get instantly put into like, there is a war, here are the 2 sides, go, right? Yeah. It's a good setup, and it's got some fun battles, a lot of rogering.
Yeah, it's a good, I guess, pilot. It wasn't a pilot, but It's a good first episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there was like the movie, The Clone Wars, not like the animated Clone Wars movie before this show.
Which is remarkably bad, and so we did not start by trying to watch that one.
Ooh, okay. Disney Plus is like confusing because they both have like very similar pictures. So I'm like, wait, no, this is a movie. Let's watch the TV show.
I'll say the one other thing I want to say about that last episode before moving on is, I think it also really establishes that all the stuff we talked about with the clones, but it also to me says a lot about how the clones themselves are taught and raised, because one of the things I think was really interesting is how surprised the clones are that Yoda treats them as such individuals and cares about them. And I don't know if that's because of how they're raised and taught, or if that's because of how the other Jedi have been treating them. But to me, that was really striking, that it's not just that Yoda treats them like this, but that's a surprise to them, that's not what they're used to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, kind of going from there into the next 3 episodes are part of an arc. One thing the show, I think, I really like that the show does is they have kind of like stories that go from like 2 to 5 episodes at a time. And it's the 3 episodes, but I think we can kind of talk about them all at once, of Rising Malevolence, The Shadow of Malevolence, and Destroying Malevolence. And it's all about the...
terrible name.
Yes, for sure. They're not subtle. General Grievous, Count Dooku, Tyrannus, Insidious. But the concept here is that there's this incredibly powerful Sith separatist ship that's been destroying Alliance ships, and they have to find a way to destroy the ship and then rescue some soldiers who were lost when they were trying to destroy the ship. And then finally, when we have the ship on the run and we've almost destroyed it, for bizarre reasons that of course make sense, Padme and C-3PO just blunder into the path of all of this, I guess because Palpatine gave her bad information, and she becomes Grievous's prisoner as kind of a human shield, and they have to be rescued. Yeah, not the highlight of Clone War plotting, I think, for sure, but
it's surprisingly bad.
Yeah. What's your guys' take on this episode arc?
Yeah, well, I think you pointed it out from the get-go. Like, the naming is just so frustrating, because, like, you're not even trying to hide that you're the bad guys. The Malevolence. My goodness. I was, like, is this like convention for, like, ship names?
Oh, yeah. So, here's my nerdiness
like
again.
IRL, I mean.
Oh.
You can Star Wars nerd, but...
In real life, they
can
name
also
ships
real life
after
nerd, yeah.
People, I guess, mostly.
Yeah.
States, people, things like that.
Enterprise? Yeah. What's Enterprise?
No, and what's like Yamanote? What's that mean? It's some sort of mountain, right?
What?
What
are you talking about?
The battleship.
The Yamato?
Yamato. Yeah, that's good.
Japanese admiral.
Yeah, okay. So his name was Mountain something. Okay, all right. But yeah, Malevolence is just like... Hello. We are the bad guys.
Star Destroyers, like in the books, when Star Destroyers are named, like Grand Admiral Thrawn's flagship was the Chimera. Okay. And then in his fleet, he had ships that were like Death's Head, Judicator, Relentless.
Victorious or something like that.
See, okay, like Victorious, Relentless, Chimera, like those are fine, but like Malevolence is kind of like, and like Death Head, I don't know. I feel like grab your thesaurus, my friends.
They're a little on the nose.
A little. It's not like Harry Potter level of like on the nose badness, but yeah. I mean. But
this, speaking of badness, these plots are bad.
Oh.
Yeah. There's actually just like a huge plot hole right in the very beginning.
Uh-huh.
They come across 3 Republic cruisers, the Malevolence does. And Dooku and Grievous are on the bridge, and they're like, this is our chance to test the weapon on the ship, which is this ion cannon, which disables all the electronics on ships and leaves them vulnerable to conventional attack.
Right.
Except, at the beginning of the episode, they're talking about how a bunch of Republic ships have gone missing in this sector.
Yeah.
So clearly the weapon has already been operational and been used.
Yeah, why are you testing it? Yeah.
It's both frustrating, but in some ways I'm glad for our listeners, especially if you haven't seen the show yet and are considering it. Because let's warn you, there are some real bad episodes, and there's some, especially in this first season, there's some very bad writing. And I think more than anything, this was a show where the authors often would say, we want to create a particular situation. And so we're going to have a MacGuffin to get that situation to happen. And how it actually happens, who the hell cares? We're not going to worry about it. And so they wanted a super ship that the Republic had to fight. Let's give that. We wanted Padme to get captured and have to be rescued. Let's give that. Mm-hmm. And the actual justifications for those things are paper thin.
Yeah.
Because no one is suspicious of Palpatine's bad information.
Yeah, it's just like, Palpatine told us to meet up here. Whoops. He must have got that bad info from somewhere. Dun, dun, dun. But yeah, it seems very much like, okay, we need to meet characters X, Y, Z. go, 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 and just like trying to cram as much of this as we can into like this very loosely constructed plot.
Yeah.
But yeah, like shoehorned in. But
or
I mean,
like in the second one, the Shadow of Malevolence.
Yeah.
The Malevolence is en route to attack this clone hospital, which is like the only hospital in the sector, and there's like 60,000 clones here.
Yeah, which
and
is
it
like
gave me really bad flashbacks to most of the Star Trek movies, because in those, the Enterprise is the only ship that's available to do this thing.
Yep.
Sometimes near Earth. I'm like, why aren't there more ships near Earth?
Yeah. Yeah, also just like get another hospital. Like, my goodness. Then you can mention it as frequently as you mention your home planet of Camino. Which is just like...
There's a little bit of eggs in a basket situation there. This is definitely true.
Yeah.
This is also where we get introduced to General Grievous. We actually get... we meet a lot of characters in this one. I think General Grievous is the one thing that the Clone Wars... Like, he was terrible in the prequels... And I think even he's funnier and has a little more of an interesting character in this, but he's still overall, I think, just a pretty terrible character who I'm generally happy not seeing on screen.
I call him General Cookie Monster because I was convinced that like this voice actor has to be Cookie Monster. It's not. I looked it up, but just like every time he says anything, I just expect him to be like, "Me want cookie." It's so ridiculous. I'd forgotten that General Grievous existed in the movies. And I guess, so his deal is that like, he was an organic, I guess technically is sort of an organic being, but like replaced 99% of himself with droid bits.
I
right?
think, I don't know if we ever got, I always thought he was just a droid that was manufactured to be a general of droids, and
no. He is
in Revenge of the Sith. Obi-Wan kills him by like grabbing his actual physical heart that's at the center of the droid body.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I thought it was weird that he had a robotic heart that could be destroyed, but yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, he's like some four-arm. It starts with a K. And I can't think of the species right now.
Okay.
But, like, the species has 4 arms, which is why he has the, like, 4-arm robot things. But, yeah, it's like his eyes and his heart, and I'm assuming his brain, are, like, the only organic parts of him left. I don't know why he's chosen to, or has been forced to, replace himself with all these droid bits. Well, but, yeah.
And that's the kind of detail that I wish they made a little bit more front and center, because I imagine part of what they're trying to get us to think is that the technology that is used to build General Grievous of like, using mechanical parts to replace, flesh parts is the same technology that eventually gets used to create Darth Vader. But
I never thought about that.
Well, and the same technology that's being used to replace Luke's hand.
Yeah, well, that's
Darth Vader got a bad deal.
Yeah,
on his parts.
Yeah, he could have been a weird
Actually,
robot.
there's like retcon fan theory that Palpatine intentionally gave Vader bad parts so that he would be less of a threat to him.
Okay.
I mean, interesting.
He does modulate his voice to go from Hayden Christensen to James Earl Jones, which is a big
that part
plus.
Is cool.
I would not mind having that deep a voice, but yes, the rest of it probably not so much. A couple other things that I think come out in this that I think is really interesting is a lot of this centers on the question of how far can you go to rescue an individual? And we have this with, first of all, Anakin disobeying orders and trying to rescue individual clones, and Master Plo Koon. Am I pronouncing that right? Plo Koon?
Plo Koon, I think it is. Because I thought his name was Platoon for the longest time until I read the subtitles. But we learned that Ahsoka had a connection with him, that he had like been the first to help her realize she was a Jedi. And then later, we go to great lengths to rescue Padme instead of trying to destroy the ship. And I think what we're trying to see here is that Anakin is, in what is almost now kind of a cliche in action movies a lot, that he's not willing to just look at the larger picture and fight the bigger fight. He's gonna
rescue the people he cares about, even if it means putting other people at risk.
Yeah.
What's your take on how that theme is described and what we kind of get out of it?
Well, it's kind of Ahsoka that drives the rescue operation.
Mm-hmm.
Of Master Plo, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like, obviously, like, it's so weird because Ahsoka brings up, like, hey, maybe they're still alive, Jedi Council. We should go look for them. And they're like, Anakin, control your Padawan. And he's just like, yeah, Ahsoka, shut up. And then they go, and then he's like, no. I mean, like, I got this. We're definitely gonna go rescue them. But, like, you can't speak up in front of these people. Yeah. Which is, like,
well,
so
even
weird.
Obi-Wan acknowledges that. He's like, oh, like, Anakin has redeployed himself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel
Again.
like Obi-Wan should be nicknamed Snips, not Ahsoka. But anyway. Or like Snaps, maybe. It's good.
So everyone knew that Anakin was going to go do this.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, all right, fine.
But it is very, like, pushing the limits of, resources, I suppose? Because, like, so don't they find Plo and, his clones' distress signal.
Right.
But the droids are going through and, like, just going through the wreckage and,
Yes.
like scavenging.
Because Dooku wants no witnesses
Right.
to the power of their ship, even though we already know that many ships have been destroyed.
Destroyed by this thing. It's very powerful. And there's, like, a bunch of other people that they just blew this up in front of. Yeah, this makes no sense. But, yeah, this sort of humanity, and it brings up again this, like, connection, right? Like, you're not supposed to have connections,
Right,
to other people, but obviously, like, Ahsoka cares very much for Master Plo. Anakin just doesn't care very much for rules and cares a lot for individuals.
Yeah. And Master Plo used, again, like, similar to Yoda, the clones in their escape pod are very despondent. They're like, no one's going to come for us. We're just clones.
Yeah.
And Master Plo keeps repeating, like, no, like, your lives matter. Like, our lives matter.
right.
Yeah, but also the whole, like, no one's gonna come for us. We're just clones. I feel like Master Plo's
And one
like,
Jedi
but
Master.
I'm a Jedi Master. Don't worry, they're coming for me.
They're coming for me.
You'll
you.
be here for the ride. Yeah,
Right, especially because it's not talked about, but every other group of clones who was in every other rescue pod does get killed.
Yeah. They didn't have any Jedi Masters in them, and I mean, I think that were Ahsoka and Anakin to pick up on one of the clones' distress signal, they probably would have gone to save them, but that
Right.
doesn't make much sense for this nonsensical plot. But yeah, and then, like, immediately afterwards. So isn't it? I thought that the Jedi Council tells Anakin to go rescue the senator from Naboo, who was on that ship. That he's not just disobeying orders and doing it of his own accord? Because, like, Obi-Wan's in on it too, right? He's got force picks up 3PO and then, like, smashes him into a train.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I watched the episode just yesterday, but for some reason I'm blanking
so
on that
memorable.
particular detail. I think, it's Padme who says, "Don't rescue me." But you're right. It may well be the Jedi go against it. To me, I just find all of these things interesting because like I said, it's a bit of a cliche in war movies, but I think it's a really interesting topic of when do you, like, is it ever morally acceptable to say, we can't rescue these two people, we have to look at this larger issue that will save hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And you never do the math, and are you always supposed to, just try and save everyone, or is it ever the, as awful as utilitarian is to try and, kind of make those connections. And I think what I like about the show is that we're certainly seeing Anakin being portrayed heroically, but to me, the whole character of Anakin is fascinating because he's so far the biggest hero of the show, and yet we all know that he's the villain by the end of it. And so it always just kind of makes me think about, like, we're cheering him for this decision, but are we also supposed to be thinking that maybe this wasn't the best decision to be made, or should he have approached it differently?
Yeah, not in these 5 episodes, but in later ones, there's sort of, like, coy little nods to what he's about to become. And this idea of, the sacrifice. Yeah. I mean, like, from a sort of cold empirical standpoint, you're like, oh yeah, if I have to give up one life to save hundreds, obviously that's what's going to happen. But when that one life is like your friend, your master, your secret wife, then it, and the 100 lives are just like a bunch of clones, then it kind of like maybe tips the scales in a different direction. But yeah, even in this episode, the destruction of the Malevolence, the third one.
It's just called Destroy Malevolence.
Just called Destroy Malevolence? That's so bad.
Because after this, no one ever feels malevolent towards anyone else ever in the universe.
They've just destroyed Malevolence. Delightful. But I think like you can sense Padme's like already getting fed up with Anakin, and we're like 4 episodes in. Because she's like, don't come rescue us. Think of everybody else. Like, you need to shut down this ship so it doesn't ion cannon a bunch of planets. And they're like, no, we're gonna come for you, Senator. Don't worry about it. So they get in there, and then like, yeah, they have their private train moment that I mentioned earlier, where 3PO interrupts them with his Anthony Danielsing. And then they go on and they go to the control room because Anakin's gonna rig it so that they think their hyperdrive's working, but it's actually just gonna hyperdrive them right into a moon. And they get in, there's a bunch of clones, and the first thing Anakin does is like force push Padme into an elevator.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And then she gets out and she just gives him this like, what the fuck, dude, look. And he doesn't say anything about it, and she just seems very like ignored.
And then he's like, I'll reprogram the thing, and she's like, okay, I guess I'll clean up the droids after you.
Yes, yeah. And that moment where she's just like, guess I'll pick up the mess you made, is just so like, I think it was supposed to be this like, oh haha, marriage bickering, but it's just like Anakin is ignoring his wife and like forgetting that she's even his wife because like they have no chemistry at all.
Yeah, his treatment of her is not really a paragon of relationship goals, unfortunately.
I mean, in any sense, no. But then it's.
Well, we live in a Joker Harley world now, so
this is also true.
Yeah, but the idea that like he turns to the dark side for Padme is just so. Ugh.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there are so many other reasons for him to turn to the dark side.
Well, and that's why what I think the show is starting to get, and just looking at these first 2 episodes, I think we start to see this, is that it's not that he loves her so much that he can't lose her. It's his frustration that he loses control. Mm-hmm. You know, because I think what's really interesting is, in the second episode in this arc, he leads a bunch of clone pilots on the attack on Malevolence. We get the Y-Wings are suddenly invented 20 years before they're used in the original movies, but okay, sure, we'll go with it. And on that mission, like, he loses a lot of his clone pilots, and he's told at one point, like, that the price of this mission might be that you lose a lot of pilots. It might be hard to, you know, the minimize casualties part of your mission might be hard. And he kind of shrugs that off. And I might be reading too much into it, but what I was kind of getting there is that he's sort of like, he's comfortable deciding to do a mission where there might be a high rate of casualties. It's when it's out of his control and he can't stop it or he can't do anything about it. That's what really drives him crazy.
Yeah, he does seem very much like a control freak. And I think Padme is someone who he thinks he can control, right? Like, he can force push her into an elevator and then make her clean up his mess. And so that sort of relationship of like, she's sick, I can't do anything about it. Oh, okay, I'll go to the dark side so I can control it. Yeah, I guess like that makes more sense instead of doing it because he loves her.
Right.
Even despite her being smooth, unlike the sand, which he hates.
Yeah. Any last comments on this series before we go into the last episode that we were watching today?
I do.
You mentioned the Y-Wings. And I don't understand the concept of a bomber, because that's what Y-Wings are,
right,
in space combat. Because like the idea of a bomber in our world is like it carries bombs over a battlefield and drops them and lets gravity do the work.
Right.
But these quote unquote bombers just seem to fire, photon or proton torpedoes, just like fighters do sometimes.
I mean, at least here, the Y-Wings don't try to use gravity because it doesn't exist in space. And it seems like that they're sort of more heavily armed, but slower and less maneuverable than X-Wings. And I can kind of believe that. It's, like you, Last Jedi is probably one of my absolute favorite movies. But those
bombers.
The bombers.
The glaring plot hole in that one, because those bombers absolutely use gravity.
Well, they're magnetic, and they're drawn towards the magnets of the parsecs of the. Oh no, we messed up. Yeah, I was gonna say one thing that I really liked in this arc was that we get introduced to 3PO, and we get some delightful R2-3PO moments, some banter, if you will, even though we can't understand a word of what R2D2 is beeping.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's cute. And we get like a lot of lines alluding to the movies. Like I think "We're Doomed" comes up a couple times.
Yep.
And yeah, I think that's really neat because in this whole series, unless it changes drastically, 3PO is Senator Amidala's droid.
Right.
And just spends the time hanging out with her. So you don't get that sort of buddy partnership with 3PO and R2 as much as you do in the movies.
Yeah, they're definitely more separated. And again, that's another plot thing of like, okay, so a Jedi has given the droid that he built as a child to a senator who he protected once 10 years ago.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's fine.
No,
they have no chemistry, so clearly nothing's going on.
That's true. Maybe they have great chemistry, but they're so convinced they have to hide it from everybody and anyone that they just never, ever, ever show it, including when they're alone.
When they're alone together, they're just like so used to being
very good
like,
actors.
They're so good at it. Well, it's just like ridiculous. Yeah, it's. We'll get into later episodes where we can talk about the chemistry or lack thereof between Padme, Anakin, and various other characters. But yeah,
that's definitely true. So let's go into the last episode because this one is also pretty clone heavy. And this is Rookies, where we find a new group of clones we haven't met before, who are kind of on a backwater mission that no one seems to really care about, even though it's actually incredibly important. But they are guarding one of these kind of like way stations between the Separatists and Kamino, which is where all the clones are being made and housed and built. Or raised. And the idea being that if this base is overrun, that the base won't be able to give a warning that a Separatist fleet is coming to attack Kamino. And so droids attack it at happily just about the same time that Cody and Rex, who we get introduced to, are coming to inspect it. And with the help of Cody and Rex, the droids who survive the initial attack are able to defeat the clones, blow up the station, and get away. Or not really win, but blow up the station at least, which alerts the Republic, who then brings a fleet because in the Clone Wars, apparently warp speed is actually instantaneous from anywhere in the galaxy to anywhere in the galaxy. But putting aside, again, some very big plot holes, what was your kind of take on this overall episode?
Yeah, so this episode, I enjoyed it. I think the idea of like, we're deployed on this, backwater, like Rishi Station is just kind of the middle of nowhere. Oh, a meteor shower. You said you wanted action. But I like it because it shows the individuality of the clones. Like even in just their bickering with each other about being stuck in the middle of nowhere, you get to see some distinct personalities come out. I liked this episode when I saw it the first time, and then later is it season 3 or season 4?
Season 3.
Season 3. You see the episodes before and after that take place before and after this episode, and so then going back and rewatching this before recording, getting ready to record tonight, it just made it so much more impactful because now we know these clones and we know who they are. And when Heavy sacrifices himself to make sure that the station gives off that they shut down the all clear signal on the station and end up blowing up the station in the process, like, you know who Heavy is at that point. And it's really upsetting that he's sacrificed himself in this way, although it seems very appropriate, right? And you even get like Cut Up, who played a really major role in the season 3 episode, just gets like rando eaten by a space eel.
Yeah.
And is just like gone, and you're like, whoa, Cut Up, what?
I just want to point out that Heavy sacrifices himself and 2 trash can droids to blow up the station.
And a bunch of battle droids, right? Or are the trash can droids on their side?
No, the trash can droids are the ones that are carrying the liquid Tabana gas.
Ah, yes. But yeah, and it's also, again, another weird plot hole, because the rookies, the shinies as they're called, immediately get promoted to the 501st, and then later go on another mission and then get immediately promoted again.
Yeah.
But it's been like a couple seasons since we've seen them, so maybe we don't remember that was like a week ago. But yeah, it's hard to follow because it is just one voice actor basically talking the whole time.
Yeah.
But no, other than that, I think it really, it shows the different abilities of these clones, and then you get to see how they handle this situation.
I think the actor does a really good job with what he's working with, in that there are different kind of slightly different voice patterns and slight accents for different clones. But you're right, it's still very, like, before they take their, I'm the same as you. I often will be watching while I'm like doing dishes or things like that, or folding laundry. And it's so hard to follow because it is just the same voice, trying to understand who all the different clones are.
Yeah, and even, so we watch it with the subtitles on, and that makes it a little easier because it is telling you who's talking. But even without the subtitles, even just watching it, the clones obviously all look the same.
Right.
So and even in, like this episode, they all haven't distinctly differentiated themselves yet.
Yeah.
Like Fives has his 5 tattoo, but they all have like similar haircuts and nothing super distinct on their armor. So you don't have those like really big obvious visual cues as to who's who.
Well, doesn't Rex? Is Rex the one who has the wolf?
The 2 commanders do, Rex and Cody, who come in later. I think one of them's in yellow as well, which helps. But just the initial guys on the station, was it Heavy Fives, Echo, Cut Up?
Yeah, and then the sergeant.
The sergeant, who okay. But yeah. I like how they deal with the clones, I guess. Not the clones. I'm sorry, the droids. In that, like, the droid dresses up like a clone and pretends to be a clone with his like voice modulation, except he keeps saying Roger, Roger. So then, like, is it Rex or Cody that just, like, shoots him in the head?
So bad.
Which is like, yes, my suspicion is confirmed. It's like, but what if it wasn't? What if you just shot a clone in the head? My goodness, check
Shouldn't
first.
have said Roger, Roger.
Yeah.
I know. And it's like, we're gonna fool them by holding up a little droid in front of the camera. Like, they'll never fall for that.
At least I appreciate that one of the other soldiers acknowledges they should never fall for that.
Yes.
This is one of those episodes where I love so much of it, and so much of it is also still pretty painful. It seemed to, I don't know, I've never been in the military, so I can't speak to those kind of experiences, but certainly I've seen a lot of war movies. I'm not in any way equating those two things, but it does feel like this episode especially, they're really trying hard to lean into that motif of this is a show about soldiers in war. And especially, you were talking about at the beginning about the that scene of them all being kind of bored and the mundanity of the situation. That to me is very much a war movie cliche, but it's one that I kind of appreciated them bringing here because it's kind of a general thought I have about this show in general, but this episode I think especially gets to it, is that we're getting to see what's happening way below the surface. This isn't the huge battle. This is 10 soldiers against 20 droids doing the thing that the history books are never going to remember. And you're probably pretty bored until the moment it happens. But for these people, it's obviously an incredibly important moment.
Yeah, for sure, right? And like the galaxy is really, really, really big. So even though, like as you discussed, like Rishi Station is extraordinarily important, there's probably a bunch of little stations just like it out in the middle of nowhere that don't feel particularly important until they're being threatened.
Mm-hmm.
This one seems important, though.
Yeah, just like
it's monitoring the flight path to the only planet where clones are produced.
Oh my goodness. Also, like, a drinking game, if you want to destroy your liver, is to take a shot anytime a clone mentions that Camino is their home planet, and that's what their home is. It's like they're home to them. It's where we were born. Oh my goodness. I think in this episode alone, they mention it like 5 times. Just like, we get it. Oh my, and it's so, like, the dialogue is so unnaturally terrible. It's like, you guys forget that if we don't stand here, then our home planet where we were born on our home planet of Camino is in trouble.
Well, and it goes to what we were saying before about it being a kids show, and I think, I mean, obviously I was the one who made the comparison. I think the comparison between this and Batman the Animated Series is accurate, but I also think that Batman the Animated Series is a TV show for 13 to 16-year-olds that tends to often be much more adult. This is a show for 8 to 10-year-olds that sometimes tends to be much more adult. And yes, but that's why it's also so interesting is, and I think, Riki, this is something you said in your notes, like, it's also a show where we get introduced to a character who literally, suicide blows himself up to save the mission. That's not something we generally show 8-year-olds.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know if it's like, because the clones are clones. So even though we're losing.
Yeah, but
no, yeah.
But we've mentioned that these clones have a later arc. Or there are later episodes that deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's emotional.
I cried.
Yeah, like it. So one of the comparisons I made was that G.I. Joe for me was the war cartoon.
Yep.
When I was growing up, and literally no one dies in that. I think they probably had like some kind of contractual obligation that they could not show anyone dying. In order to show this on TV. There's always a parachute. Every single time a ship gets blown up. A tank blows up. You see the pilot of the tank like start to climb out and then go, as it blows up. They shoot their lasers at each other and never hit. So for me, like one of the formative cartoons was Robotech, where several characters do die. And those were like really big moments. So to get something like this, so early on in this series is really quite telling, I guess, of how much television has changed and like what people are willing to show their kids. Yeah. It is very much a TV show about war. And yeah, there are casualties. And yeah, I think it was surprising that so before Heavy even sacrifices himself, a lot of clones just die in the initial strike. Mm-hmm. And then even one who, like, Cut Up, who, a named character, is just like I said, randomly eaten by a space eel. He makes a joke. He's like, better watch out for the space eels. And then the space eel just eats him and carries him away. And he's dead. Speaking of, and you're just like, what?
I am curious about the xenobiology of this galaxy. That it does seem that there are an awful lot of asteroids that support life forms that seem far too large for the amount of food they consume on this lifeless rock of an asteroid.
Yeah, or like the asteroid is just one big monster in the center of it, just waiting for a ship to land inside of it. Yeah.
So Sarah mentioned like drinking game stuff earlier. 2 of my drinking game things in this series are take a drink anytime General Grievous does the Linda Blair, like, walk on all fours. Yeah. And then another one is take a drink anytime Obi-Wan Kenobi rides a random animal on a planet. Because he does that in Revenge of the Sith. Yep. And he at least like 3 times, I think, I've seen him just ride an animal. It's like, what? Are you Dr. Doolittle of the Jedi?
To be fair, he's a Disney princess. I think like one of it's the same animal 2 times, but yeah, I thought you were gonna say take a drink every time Obi-Wan Kenobi like makes a sarcastic remark when he's about to die, but then
there does definitely seem to be that somewhere along the way Lucas Studios figured out that they knew how to make Rancor like monsters and just never let that go, because there are in every movie since then and in all the TV shows the love of just showing big, dumb monsters that will attack you if you get too close, which somehow live in proximity to space-age civilizations without problem. It's a little surprising to me, but, you know.
Or I feel like you walk out to your car in the morning, it's like, whoa, a dinosaur!
Look, no one ever goes fishing on Naboo, clearly, because those waters are very, very dangerous.
There's always a bigger fish.
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, so I don't know if that's in a movie, but in the Star Wars ride at Disney, I'm assuming World as well, but Disneyland, one of the scenarios they have now is like you go to Naboo. So this is probably from a movie, and I'm just not remembering it. Where like you're flying around, and a fish almost eats you, but then a bigger fish eats it instead, and you get to speed away. Is that just a scene from a movie?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
And then Qui-Gon says there's always a bigger fish.
Oh, Cool. All right, cool. Glad that I spotted that reference immediately and tied it instead to a ride at Disneyland. But yeah, I feel like that's Star Warsy enough now. That's good.
Yeah.
I have a very faint memory of the prequel movies. So watching even just like the Clone Wars, I think I'm finding myself asking like a bunch of
and
questions about it.
And the internet will give you all the answers so that you don't have to go back and watch them again.
Yeah, I don't want to watch them.
Yeah, that's fair. I also don't, because I mean, like, so I've seen Phantom Menace twice. Once when I was like a little kid, and then once when I watched all 3 prequels, and I've only seen the other 2 one time each. And yeah, even by the time that I was watching the last one, whose name I can't even remember, Revenge of the Sith? No.
Yep, Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah. I was just so frustrated with it that I don't think I was even paying a bunch of attention, because it was just like, there was so much potential. And I think that's why I'm enjoying Clone Wars so much, because they're actually going in and exploring that potential. Yeah.
I think it's very true. It's exploring the potential. It's broadening out the world. It's really doing something interesting with this universe. And so I'm really glad you guys are liking it as much as I do, and that we're going to have, I think, a lot to talk about going forward. I know it's getting late, especially you guys are on the East Coast, and so it's even later for you. So let me just bring up one last thing quickly as kind of a closing topic. Every one of these episodes starts with a kind of like old-timey movie clip narrator telling us in very purple language and very sort of excitable voice what's happening, and that, Padme has fallen into the clutches of the devious General Grievous, and Anakin's rushing to rescue them. What do you think of that framing technique of starting all the episodes with that narrator voice? And what's your kind of understanding of him?
I love it. So I like that it's like the Dateline. Here's what we're gonna see in the movies. Our boys are on the front line. Yippee-yi. Or and like that old, like you're saying, the old-timey, not just old-timey movie, but like old-timey war reels. Yeah. Of like, here's our propaganda film for our good fight in the war. So like you see it in, I mean, obviously in those old-timey newsreels, but then they're using it again in like Captain America. Sorry. It's late here on the East Coast, which means it's time for the cat to run around like a maniac.
That's fair.
So yeah, you see it in like even as this allusion to like it's war times. But what I really like is that the narrator voice is a character. Like he's just one of the generals, and you hear him speaking. Oh my goodness, cat. Sorry. You hear him speaking in that sort of dramatic voice, just to the Jedi, and like telling them what's what. So I think it's this interesting, like breaking of the fourth wall, because obviously when he's giving these sort of Dateline updates, it's stuff that, some of the stuff is stuff he'd have no way of actually knowing about.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting in placing it in like this is war context.
It's the Admiral. It's Admiral Yularen.
Admiral Yularen. Oh my goodness.
Who you will be surprised to know survives the war, joins the Empire.
Oh no.
And is stationed on the Death Star.
Oh.
And in fact is supposedly one of the characters in the room when Darth Vader chokes them off for making fun of the Force.
Nerd.
So this guy 100% should be like, oh yeah, Force is real, my friends.
Yeah, that's always...
I served with Jedi.
that's another
goodness.
big plot hole that established. But yeah, I have the same feeling as you do, and I remember at first I wasn't quite clear because it felt like a weird thing to do if it was meant to be a universal narrator. But once I realized that no, this isn't a narrator, this is what we're hearing is, like you said, the Republic propaganda. And that's why it's told in these terms, and you're meant to kind of think of it as an unreliable narrator. That made it so much more interesting to me.
Yeah. And there are things that you sort of have to suspend your disbelief because in the update, the narrator is telling you things that he would have absolutely no reason to know or ability to know.
Yep.
But yeah, I really like it as a framing device. When you were talking about the introduction, I thought you were gonna mention the little fortune cookie quotes.
Oh, yes.
Oh no,
I have. Okay, are you ready for this?
Yeah, I'm waiting for Riki to talk about these. Go ahead.
Oh my goodness.
I told you I would do this. Okay, so in addition to the newsreel, there's also like a spiffy, inspirational sentence
in
at
traditional Star Wars blue letters floating in the middle of the sky.
Okay, so for each episode, I have the actual quote at the beginning, the inspirational quote. I've taken a key word from that quote and then searched on a website that has fortune cookie messages.
Okay.
It's actually called www.fortunecookiemessage.com. And I plugged in that keyword and I searched for a similar quote.
Oh my goodness.
And now it is up to you to decide which is the Clone Wars quote and which is the fortune cookie message. So we'll start with Ambush.
Okay.
The Yoda episode.
Yep.
1. The leader seeks to communicate his vision to his followers. Or 2. Great leaders inspire greatness in others.
It's definitely 2.
I think it's 2, yeah. The first one's a little too wordy.
Okay. You got that. That is the Clone Wars quote.
Okay.
Episode 2. Rising Malevolence. The keyword is conviction.
Okay.
1. Belief is not a matter of choice, but of conviction.
Ooh.
Or 2. If you feel you are right, stand firmly by your convictions.
No, it's number 1.
Matthew?
I think it's... Oh, this is a tougher one. I'm going to say 1.
All right, you're correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 2 could be Captain America.
That's true, too.
Jeez, yeah.
And it's also why I often disagree with Captain America, but moving on.
Yeah, anyway.
Episode 3, Shadow of Malevolence. The keyword here was path. So 1. Easy is the path to wisdom for those not blinded by themselves. Or 2. You can't go down the right path without first discovering the path to go down.
What?
Oh, this is harder.
Have you like...
Because the first one I was like, that can't be the Clone Wars. But the second one, I'm like, that can't be the Clone Wars.
That can't be the Clone Wars. Have you like de-Yoda'd any of them? Like if they're in... No?
These are all the full quotes.
I think the second one is the Clone Wars.
What was the second one?
You can't go down the right path without first discovering the path to go down.
What? What was the first one?
Easy is the path to wisdom for those not blinded by themselves.
Okay, I think it's... Then this
No,
is... Yeah, I think it's the first one.
All right, so here we disagree. She thinks it's the first one. I think it's the second one.
It's the first one.
Because this is the one where Anakin is like... Or not Anakin, Ahsoka is like disagreeing and going and following to get Master Flow back, right?
No, this is the one where Anakin leads the fighters
Oh, well, then I don't even
the
know.
Y-Wings
All right.
on the attack.
I was just guessing lucky then.
Okay. Episode 4, Destroy Malevolence.
All malevolence.
is-
There'll never be malevolence anywhere in the galaxy anymore.
The keyword is plan.
Plan.
Quote 1. Plan your work and work your plan.
Ooh.
Quote 2. A plan is only as good as those who see it through.
Okay, I know this one. So I'm gonna let you guess, Matthew.
I think it's number 2, simply because I had Chinese food a couple days ago, and I think I got number 1 as an actual. It was some version of it, certainly.
amazing.
So yeah, I'm going to say number 2 is the Clone Wars one.
Yeah.
You are right.
Okay.
All right. Episode 5, Rookies. The keyword was confidence. Quote 1. It is best to act with confidence, no matter how little right you have to it.
Well,
or quote 2.
That's stupid, but okay.
That's bad advice, but okay.
The best confidence builder is experience.
Ooh.
Oh.
This really comes down to who do I have more faith in? The writers of fortune cookies or because they're both pretty dumb sentiments, but the first one is much worse.
Yeah, like the second one is at least like kind of not the worst advice, whereas the first one's just bad advice.
I think the first one's the Clone Wars.
The be confident anyway.
Yeah.
It is best to act with confidence, no matter how little right you have to it.
Because that's kind of it. Now, but
That's kind of what they do, right? Oh no, but they're shiny and new. Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm gonna pick number 1. I think it's number 1.
Matthew?
I'm number 1 too. Yeah.
You're wrong.
Oh,
wow. Fortune cookie. FortuneCookieMessage.com.
So wait, what was the real one?
The best confidence builder is experience.
I guess.
The best part is we watched this episode last night.
Yeah, but I didn't read them the second time.
Well, and the funny thing is,
Anyway.
I didn't pick that one because that one is the one that sounds, of all 10, the most like a fortune
the most
cookie.
fortune cookies. Yes, yeah, yes. Oh gosh.
So
That's why I started doing this. I'm like, what is up with these fortune cookie messages?
this is a great thing. I'm 100% saying we should put this as a regular thing in our episodes. And I might even say that sometimes, maybe instead of asking it on air, we'll have you read them on air, but then have our listeners try and guess. Because I think this is really kind of brilliant.
Yes, yeah.
So-
It gets harder because some of the seasons, it's just like very obvious war stuff.
Yep.
And it's like, I'm never going to find a fortune cookie thing about this war.
About the Force. And like some of them, I know some of the little scrawls are definitely written in
In Yoda.
Yeah. Which is why, so the first one that you thought, the fortune cookie one, I thought sounded like a Yoda message unyoded. Does that make sense? Which one was it?
Oh, yeah, I remember the one you're...
Great leaders inspire greatness in others. I guess they're like right? Like that sounds like
in
it
others,
could
do
have been
great
a Yoda.
leaders inspire greatness or something like that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I was like, that's definitely the Star Wars one. Did you just undo
Which
it?
I will say leads me to a plug. I'm going to say all the information about this at the end of the episode, but we have a Star Wars Universe podcast Facebook page on which I'll be posting our episodes as well as posting questions. And today I posted something asking if anyone has a linguistics background. I'm very curious if there is any actual in linguistic science explanation for why someone would speak the way Yoda would speak. Like, would it have something to do with his culture or the way his brain works, or is he just being pretentious? So
All of the above.
if any of you have any linguistics background, whether that's a PhD or 5 minutes internet research, please let us know. I'd be very curious.
Yeah, I really like Yoda speak. It's helping me learn Japanese, because of like the sentence structures seem Yoda-fied to me as far as where like the verb always appears at the end of a sentence.
That's exactly what I'm at. I was wondering about it. I was wondering, is there some sort of logic to that, to the way Yoda speaks, that it would be possible that like his species had a language where he learned to conceptualize language in a different way. And so that's very interesting to hear that for Japanese it might be a little similar.
Sure, but I mean then like like when Japanese people learn English, they don't
Right.
still use the grammar of their language. But I mean, I guess when you're like 500, maybe he was speaking only Yoda language for like 300 years and just kind of got ingrained.
I got nothing.
But yeah, if like I would be super interested to know if there's like a linguistic reason behind Yoda speak.
Yeah. So yeah, if you, and our listeners, if you know about this, please find our Facebook page, Superhero Ethics. Sorry, that's my other podcast. That's Muscle Memory.
I follow that one.
Star Wars Universe podcast. But yeah, let's kind of wrap up. The cat sounds like it wants some attention. Do you guys have any other final thoughts or ideas you didn't get a chance to talk about, or questions you wanted to raise?
Just want to say, like, we're super excited to be on board for this, and thanks for getting us to watch the Clone Wars. It's really exciting, and I would encourage anyone who's listening who has maybe had a similar experience as us, as being like kind of turned off the Clone Wars just from what we've heard about it and how we feel about the prequels, to give it a chance. And season 1 is a bit of a slog, but yeah, and once you get through it, it's really rewarding. It's a really great show.
Yeah, I'm going to reiterate, don't listen to the people who say that it makes the prequels better. It's just like better than the prequels. Like it's what the prequels should have been, perhaps. And I never want to watch the prequels again, but I feel like I might have to do some research on like these characters and plot points, and I'm dreading it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. So, and I would just reiterate, yeah, I'm talking about it with you guys reminds me why I liked this show so much, and that I'm really excited, especially as we start getting into the later seasons, where I think we're really going to get into some things that raise big questions for the whole Star Wars universe. And since it sounds like the three of us all had somewhat different experiences about how we experienced Star Wars, and from like what perspective, especially like Sarah, I appreciate you pointing out what you said about being from Canada, because I know I unfortunately have the cultural assumption that far too many Americans have, where I think of things in terms of the American experience and forget that that's not the universal experience, which is very much to my detriment. And so for both of you, I'll really appreciate hearing, your different experiences. And also, Sarah, as you said, like you being someone who first watched the show during the Jar Jar Binks era. But yeah, so, and Riki, what you said about what the show has meant to you, and the Darth Vader and all that. And to our fans, thank you guys so much for listening. We're really excited if you're a listener, you probably can tell by now that we're going to be having 2 different kind of ongoing series of episodes, on this podcast. Every other week, I'm going to be, or around that, we'll definitely have some weeks off with people being busy, but we're going to try for about twice a month. I'll be talking with Riki and Sarah about the show, The Clone Wars. And then on the off weeks, I'll be talking with Jeff Randall about The Mandalorian, and in each one kind of covering an episode or 2. Yeah. So we'll, that the first episode of that is already out. And if you're watching Mandalorian, I'd love, Riki and Sarah, and also for any of our fans, you might really like that. But for all of us, I know the reason why I started these podcasts, the reason why I think you guys are having a good time too, is because we love talking about this. And I want these podcasts to not to be, we have spoken and that's the end of the conversation, but I want, to hear more from you guys. So, we have an email, a Twitter account, and a Facebook page. Most of them are just Star Wars Universe Podcast, but you can also find them on our show notes, find links to them. Let us know what you think. Let us know, what you got out of these first couple episodes, or why you love this show. Tell us how we're totally wrong, or give us your own opinions. We'd love to keep those conversations going online, or even if you're up for it, read your comments on air next week and keep the conversation going that way. So on behalf of myself, thank you guys so much for being a part of this. And to all of our listeners, hope you keep tuning in. Please share this with other people and help spread the word. Have a great day.